In the last video, we added some content to this first structure with the roof and the ceiling joist. And now what we're going to do is add some bearing walls down the middle of the structure. So I'm in section 1, and I want to go to the short section. So this one here is section 2. Let's go to section 2. Okay, so looking in this direction, I have, you don't see them articulated in the floor assembly, but we're planning on I-joists that are spanning from the south side of the building to the north side. And it's a 40-foot span. So we're going to need to have some sort of structure down the middle of the project in order to take the loads of those framing members. So in the lower part, I'm going to use some steel, a steel beam and column. And then on level 1, we'll have a bearing wall right down the middle. And the same thing on structure on level 2. We'll have the same bearing wall that's here. Now the difference between this structure and the last one, in the last structure, we had a truss that was spanning the entire roof, or the entire width of the structure. So we didn't need the bearing wall. But in this case, we have these ceiling joists that are sized to span half the distance. So we will need to include a bearing wall in this one. Now in your textbook, there is a detail on page 167, this one down here. In this case, we have I-joists running this direction. And we have a steel beam that's sitting below the I-joist. And then there is a column below the beam. This is basically what we're going to be drawing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is bring in a beam. So I'm going to go to Insert, Load Autodesk Family. If you type in the search bar for steel W, and then look for the W shapes. So there's two options here. You can see here AISC 14.1, and this one should be AISC 15. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. I'm going to go with the second one here, and I'm going to load that. Okay, so you're going to get a table of possible steel beams. It starts off with some really big beams. So the 44 indicates what its depth is, or height. So again, sometimes you'll hear depth in reference to steel beams, which is basically how tall it is. If I go down lower, so we're looking for something that is a beam profile, so it shouldn't be square. So if I continue down, so W12 is approximately what we'd need for this in this instance. If you look at this W12 by 72, it's a square member. And this would be more appropriate for a column. For a beam, you want the width to be much smaller than the height. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to choose a W12 by 30 and say OK. All right, now it may have already been in your Revit file, and if that's fine. You can overwrite the existing version, or you could use the one that's already there. Okay, so I'm going to be placing this beam based on level 1. It'll be below level 1, but I'm going to go to level 1. And I'm going to draw this beam. So I'll go to structure, beam, and then search for that W12 by 30. And I'll draw it across here. Now, I may have to make some adjustments in the width, but basically I'm going to draw it all the way across here to just inside the sheathing. All right, now let's take a look at this in the section. Section 2. So here you can see it, and it's been placed directly below level 1. Since I'm going to match that detail that's in the textbook, I need to drop it. The height that I want to bring it to And maybe I should re-reference this. Here's the detail. There's the beam. There's a piece of blocking on top. You can see it right here. Those are typically nailers for other wood members. So that one would be attached to the steel beam, and they tend to be made out of 2x members. So this maybe is a 2x6, for example. So basically I need to bring it below the assembly here. So I have some drywall in this location, and my nailer is going to be to this height right here. So let's turn on the spotlight a little bit. So basically I want to have a nailer that's going to sit right in here. So I need to go, I need to put my steel beam, the top of it, about 1.5 inches below this line right here. So first thing I want to do is measure that distance. So again, from this point here to the top, 1.2 3/4. And then I'm going to add 1.5 inches to that. So I'll get 1.4 1/4. So I'm going to go over to this beam, click on it, and change its start level and end level, both of them, 1 foot 4.25. And the end level the same because we don't want it to be sloped. Okay. So again, there will be a piece of blocking that would sit on top of that. And then the next thing I want to do is bring in the column that will sit below the beam. So we have one already. If I go to level 0, there's one right here. That's the one that was in the crawl space. I'm going to copy that one. And I want to copy from the middle of it. Now, for the crawl space one, we spaced the columns closer than we are here. If you're using steel, it's a stronger material, so you can, with the same depth of beam, carry a lot more load. So that's why I'm going to leave this one just at the center. I won't add an additional one. All right, now I'm going to go back to section 2. Okay. And what I'll do first, obviously this one's too short because it was in the crawl space, and this one has a full basement. So my base offset, I'm going to drop it down so it sits below the slab here. So our slab is 4 inches thick. So my base offset from level 0 is going to be -4 inches. And I'll apply that. Okay, and then for the top here, I'm going to go to modify and use the align tool. And I'll click on the bottom of the beam and the top of the column. See, did it adjust the bottom? It did. Okay, so we may need to make some revisions to this. So I am going to click on this beam or the column and change it back to -4 inches. Let's see. Click on OK. And I think that is how we want this to look. Okay, you can see it's going down to the top of this footing. All right, so that takes care of the beam and the column. All right, the next thing I'll work on is getting some bearing walls in these 2 locations. So I'm going to go to level 1 for this. And I'm going to go to architecture and wall. And I'm going to look for an interior wall. Let's go with this 4 7/8 inch wall. Edit type. And I'm going to make a duplicate. The duplicate is going to be called interior 4 3/4. Okay, and I'll click on OK. I need to make some changes to the structure. So this wall is using a metal stud layer. We're going to make that dimension lumber. Say OK. And the thickness is similar. The actual thickness will be 3.5 inches. So 3.5 inches plus a layer of gypsum wallboard on each side comes to 4 3/4. Click on OK. And OK. Now we'll go ahead and draw these walls. I'm going to draw from here. Here. Okay, does the wall joins just fine. Don't need to make any changes to that. And I'll go ahead and add another one to level 2. Little wall, basic interior wall. And I'll span across here as well. And then let's take a look in section 2. See what we have. Okay, so that one is going up to the bottom of the, to actual level 2. And I wanted to join to the bottom. So I'm going to click on the wall and attach top base. Click on the floor. Okay, so that one looks fine. This one looks fine. And obviously the wall doesn't have the plates yet. And I guess I can join this one also to here. Okay, so there I have 2 bearing walls. Now, these are made out of 2x4s, unlike the exterior walls. 2x4s for this 2-story structure to support the structure above is fine. The reason we did the 2x6s on the perimeter was to give some extra insulation. So in terms of the structure, we could have made these out of 2x4s. Okay. So that's the bearing wall that runs down the middle of that first structure. And one thing I want to note, so this beam is sitting below the I-joist. And what happens is, you end up starting to cut into your head height here. So I think when I measure this, it's just under 7 feet. Sometimes if you want to have, more clear span, you don't want this interruption of a beam that drops below, you can also detail this so the steel beam is sitting inside here and the I-joists are kind of hung from the sides of it. So that's an alternative, and that would allow you maybe to have a flush ceiling so you wouldn't have a little drop down where the beam is. So that's it for this assignment.